everybody, I'm Tara from Crooked Row. Happy New Year. We are in 2025. It's so wonderful. I wanted to put out a video very quickly because we are all starting to get our seed catalogs for 2025. And when you start to get your catalogs, I feel like you really need sort of a buying guide. Not necessarily even just for newbies, but I think that I've been gardening now 13 years. Actually, I've been gardening longer than that, but we've been here homesteading for 13 years. And I still like to hear other little tips and tricks from other gardeners. So I got myself a cup of coffee and thought we would settle in for some good suggestions for this year's seed buying. So let's get started. So the very first thing that you have to consider when you're doing your seeds is you have to create a budget. And so I know that when I say this, a lot of people are like, well, no kidding. But I think that what happens, especially if you're like me, is sometimes I'll have a general idea of what I want to spend, and then I get into these catalogs or I get online and wow, do I way overspend. So I think that the very first thing is that, and I'm not saying that you have to stick to a specific amount, but I would say that it's super important for you to have okay, at the low end, I'm probably gonna spend this, and at the high end, I'm gonna spend that. I think that is the very first thing that you need to figure out, because you're probably always gonna overshoot your budget. But if this is not, it's one thing if you're gardening to just have fun and it's just a hobby, I mean, you're still gonna want to budget at least a little bit. But people who are actually using this for their food, you do want it to be pretty financially responsible at some point. I know you can always find vegetables and stuff cheaper than what you can grow it, so to speak, but especially when you grow in bulk, it usually is better to grow than it is to buy. So that is tip number one. Get a budget, figure out what you can afford, and stick to it. I know it's hard, but we'll keep each other accountable. Okay, my tip number two is likability. And I know that sounds a bit weird, but there are things, and I feel like this is probably the most true thing I'm going to say today. I mean, everything I'm saying is true, but especially if you are growing for a family, or actually even if you're growing for like a farmer's market or something, likability is so important. So to give you an example, we love a certain type of green bean, and I was growing the what are they called? They're the really long red green beans. And I still love the red long green beans, but my family does not, it has almost like a waxy texture to it, and my family just doesn't like that as much as they love the French fillet green beans. And so if I'm gonna grow the red green beans, it will be minute that I would order. Whereas they're called Kalima French fillet type, and I get them from Rare Seeds. Love them. They're tender, they're extremely long. I mean, they get like 6 to 10 inches long. We've had some that are 12 inches long. I mean, just these very long green beans. They have a really delicious flavor to them. But you also, so those are bush beans. And so quality is so important. Like even in, I'm flipping through, like even in tomatoes. So we had grown the blueberry tomatoes, which they grew like wildfire. They just, I mean, we had thousands of those little black/purple tomatoes. Now my husband liked them a lot, but no one else did. I mean, they just, to me, they were extremely bland. But so we have a lot of luck with the, what is it called? Sunrise Bumblebee. And I'm talking about the cherry tomatoes. So the Sunrise Bumblebee, they're pretty prolific. They're not as prolific as the blueberries were, but they are prolific enough for us to have extras left over. And And we love the flavor. I mean, the flavor, they really are a snacking tomato. I mean, like, my kids get in that garden and I barely can pull any out because I like to pack those in olive oil and spices and stuff and roast them with onions and then pack them in a canning jar. And I mean, last year I didn't have any because especially my 2 little ones, they get in there and it is like candy. I mean, they just eat and eat and eat. So keep that in mind too. Sometimes it's so likable, you're gonna need to order more. So just keep that in mind of the likability. It's so good to keep a journal too, because once you start having so many crops, you're gonna forget. I mean, you think you're not, and unless something is truly remarkable, like very, very good or very, very bad, you're gonna forget. Keep a journal. I keep a journal. So something that goes right along with likability is how much do you order? So if this is your first time garden, you're not gonna know that. But if this is even just your second year garden, you're definitely gonna know that. And again, if you keep a journal, you will have a record of it. But you will become, like, for us, I shouldn't say you will become, for us, we have become very specific about what we know that we love. And so we love butternut squash. And so you have to, like, consider things. Like, we have terrible problems. I mean, really bad problems with the squash bug here. So it is definitely a labor of love when we do any squash or pumpkin, because it's just pulverized by the squash bug. And we have followed a lot of the tips and tricks online, and we're just so inundated here with the squash bug that they don't really help. So, but we do pick them off. And later in the season, I'll show you some of the tips and tricks that I have heard and we have tried. But you still have to really keep an eye out here. So my point is how much squash am I actually gonna grow? So we grow butternut squash, and I can usually get away with like maybe 6 vines. That is manageable enough for us to keep, you know, day after day looking at those leaves, making sure that the squash bug and the squash vine borer is not getting into my vines. But we also grow zucchini, and I do grow quite a bit of zucchini, and I try to do that within season, but that's a whole other topic. So, but I use a lot of zucchini too. And so you just need to think through, like it really is good. I sit down with a notebook and a pen and all my magazines or all my catalogs, and some of it is online. Like, I keep my phone right here, and I am just like figuring out. One, I also, and this goes back to number 1, I also check and see who has the better deals, you know, and it does vary from year to year. So right now, the clear winner for us in 2025 is definitely Seed Savers Exchange. If you haven't used them, they're a great company. They're trying to save heirloom seeds. I love that. But even apart from that, Rare Seeds is a great one too. I'll actually leave a list at the end of the video of a lot of the ones that we use, just so in case you are unaware of them. But we actually, I think there was 1 year, and it was during COVID, that our Rare Seeds order was a flop. Like, everything that we got from them just did not germinate. And if it did germinate, like, it was all very poor. I don't know what happened during COVID, but we actually have very, very, very good luck here. I mean, you're always going to have something fail. If you don't have something fail, I don't know. I don't believe that. Everybody has failure. It just is what it is, especially when you're a gardener. There's always next year. But so how much do you need is going to, and so I just want to show you really quickly. So you have these beautiful Ukrainian tomatoes, and underneath there is, I don't think you can see that. I might have to put up a different picture, but for 25 seeds, it's $4.25. Yes, seeds have gone sky high. They used to be way cheaper than this and have more seeds in them, by the way. So it's gone up, it's gone up in price and down in seeds. But so, oh, that was Paul Robeson tomatoes. The Ukrainian purple are next to it. But anyway, but they also sell 250 seeds for $8.66 or an eighth of an ounce for $17.06. And so you just kind of have to do the math. One, by figuring out how much you need. And so I sit and I figure, so I'm probably gonna have 10 Sunrise Bumblebee tomatoes. If I have 10 Sunrise Bumblebee tomatoes, plants, then getting a pack of 25 is probably what I want. Unless I see, so this is a perfect example. These Ukrainian purple tomatoes right here. Those, the seed packet of 35 seeds is $4.25, but 250 seeds is $8.66. So if I want more room to play with those, or I know that it's a type of seed that's gonna last a long time, I'll go ahead and save myself money in the long run and buy the extra set of seeds. So just kind of watch that. I mean, I know that people a lot of times will either go one way or the other. They order way too many seeds or not enough. And I mean, you can always get back in, especially now that, you know, I say I'm aging myself now that we have the internet. There's people who are watching right now that have only known life with the internet. But since the onslaught of the internet, now you can just like jump on an order. And so it just makes it a lot more convenient when you see that you're running low. So in the how much, for you, those of you that have had a previous garden, you're also going to want to make sure that you aren't reordering seeds that you already have on hand. So I keep it's like a clear tote. I hope you know what I mean by tote, like those storage containers, but they're small. I mean, they're like 24 inches long and probably 18 inches wide. And so I just store those in there. And when I'm gonna go through, I make a list. I know some people will make like a spreadsheet or something and keep on a computer of what they have. And then when they use them, they'll actually go in and take those out so that they always have this updated list of what they have and what they don't have. I am not that organized. So I do this once a year and I see what I have. And if we had a bigger operation, I might go to that length, but yeah, I'm not that organized. So I make my list of what I have so that I don't keep double picking. And I try to, I'm so happy that the seed places, they put dates on them too. So if you have ripped off where the date is, always go back and with a permanent marker put what season you ordered that in. It's very wise. And then you can get rid of things that you know are not going to germinate, or you can keep them and not expect that to germinate. So that does make a difference in the how much. My next tip is about space considerations. Now, that can mean the actual physical space that you're using, which for a lot of people who garden is a drastic problem because they run out of space every year. I have friends who run out of space every year and they don't have enough room to get in crops that are important to them because they underthought their space considerations. So a good one to look at this are peas. Ooh, the beautiful peas, or beans. And so with beans, you have lots of different varieties. Some are runner beans, some are climbing beans, some are bush beans. And so clearly, if you are very, very limited on space, you're going to want to go vertical. And so you're going to be able to fit in a whole lot more if you go vertical rather than going along the ground. So the space consideration is literally the physical area that you have. That's one. And so there are just too many varieties that we have out there that climb, that there's no reason why you can't go up. I mean, I guess there's some people who do have considerations going up, but for the most part, you're good. So don't just be sold on one type of thing. If you're having space considerations, really think about going vertical. And there are so many cool ways to trellis them. If you want to go natural and just use branches from a tree and kind of lash them together and run it along something, or there is the trellis to make you jealous. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but that is a really cool way to have a trellis system too. It's not the prettiest trellis system, but it works, and that's all that matters when you garden. Another issue with space considerations are light. So you're gonna want to, if you have space considerations, you're going to want to go through and figure out what plants need the most light, and then figure out how much space you have in your garden for that. And so I think that in our garden, we don't have any trees, and it's such a large space, I don't have to worry about that. But friends of mine have to worry about that. Like even my mom, she lives in a tiny apartment, and she just has, you know, a few raised beds right outside her door. But at some point the sun goes over and it starts hitting the roof and it shades it. So the outside bed will get full sun, but the inside bed won't. And so she has to consider what plants can take that lighting arrangement. So clearly tomatoes need to go in the outside box. And then she's gonna have to figure out how much how much space in her raised bed is going to take that up. So these are considerations that you need to think of. Light is a huge one, especially for the small gardener. Now, another issue with space considerations, so these are categories within this category, is your soil. For some people, you're not gonna have to worry about this, but even the small gardener has to worry about this, because almost no one has the exact same soil from start to finish in the garden. Even people who grow in raised beds, maybe one bed is filled with a different fill than another bed. And I know people that have different, actually I have different, one of our boxes is far more sandy than the other box, which should tell us something about when you buy your compost from people. But if that is the consideration, then clearly in that bed, we always plant sweet potatoes. If I skip a year planting sweet potatoes, I'll put regular potatoes in there, and it works out like a dream. But clearly I wouldn't put anything in that bed that is a heavy feeder. So like cabbage, I did grow cabbage in there one year, and I mean, I still got a yield, but it was just not what the cabbage wanted. So considering what soil you have, if you're planting in the ground, so here we have places that is the most beautiful loamy soil I have ever put my hands in. I just love it. And then there's a place like right in the front, like where we have our flowers, that is clay. I mean clay, like I could make pottery from it. And so that is a consideration of what I plant there. And so I try to plant things, and of course there are remedies to clay soil like adding gypsum, but that takes a couple years for it to really take effect. So for this season, if you have clay soil, just remember that and think about either ways around it or things that you can do to change your soil, or buying plants that work really well in that area. So these are 5 things that are truly fundamental when you're going through and doing your seeds. Now, if you're just having fun and you just want to go through and pick whatever you want, I totally get that, because I did it for years. But it is wise to, so that you don't overspend, especially now that seed packets are like $5 a packet. I have actually seen some of these seed places where they're charging $7 a packet. So we do have to be probably better stewards of how much money we're spending on the garden, or it's really not worth it for us to do. Okay, I also wanted to give a quick tip on your seeds. If you want to take your seeds, you're going to want to either isolate those seeds, but typically those seeds in the ground, like once they start producing and then giving you seed, the isolation distances are substantial, typically like 1/8 of a mile. Corn is a mile. So isolating them, there's lots of tips online. I mean, some people bag them, some people, you know, do different things so that they can make sure that their seed is not, I don't want to say corrupted. It will give you something that's not like what you have. It doesn't mean that a watermelon is going to be a tomato. I think people think that, or they think it's not going to grow. It will just not grow like the parent. So you could come up with your own variety. But if you're looking for purity of seed, then you're going to want to not plant that year 10 different types of green beans, or, you know, 20 different types of tomatoes or whatever. So that is just a little side note I wanted to give. So if you are looking for seed purity and you're wanting to isolate your seed, you can either do that when it's in the ground, or you can just go with one type. So I kind of wanted to throw that in because I think that we forget that when we're ordering seeds as well. So sometimes, here's what I do. Like the years that I want to save tomato seed, because I use my tomato seed for quite a few years. The years that I want to do that, I will only grow the Brandywine, or I will only grow Amish paste. I won't grow anything else. Actually, the Brandywine that I grow is a tomato leaf variety. It does not mix with the Amish paste, but let me go back to what would mix. So our bumblebee mix and our Amish tomatoes, they would cross-pollinate. So because they would cross-pollinate, I only grow whatever seed I'm wanting to save. So that is a consideration as well. Do you even need the seed that year? And then I might have another year where I grow something else, or I'll have years where I don't save the seed at all. So, because I know I'm gonna get new seed the next year. And I like to do that too. Like I like to save my seed and then get seed and kind of mix them. So, us gardeners, we're crazy. So as you are going through your beautiful glossy seed catalogs, I just wanted to leave you with a few tips so that we don't overspend in this gardening season again. So remember, if we can order our seeds, anybody can. Thanks. Bye.